Welcome back to the first episode in our new podcast, Politically Hopeless. The idea behind this show is that me and Ollie have very different political opinions, but we are hoping that we can reach consensus through some constructive debate. So, the idea here is that we're going to go through a series of controversial topics, and at the end of it all, can we form an agreement and can we come up with a policy position as if we're constructing a manifesto? That's going to have to do. I can't do another intro.
No, that was good. That was good. So I'm broadly speaking, I would say a social democrat. I believe in the sort of spirit of the post-war consensus, which originally I would characterize as socialist, but one nation Toryism sort of feeds into it as well. And I'm pro-Europe, I would say, just in a nutshell. That's where I stand.
Yeah. I would say that I am center right, but if you're on the left, you would say that I am far right.
Yeah,
And
I
I am
think I
very
would
much
say that.
anti Europe. Would you actually, though?
Well, we'll see, we'll get into it. I think that will become
Yeah,
apparent today. So the
it
topic
will
we
become
are
apparent.
discussing to find a policy position for our manifesto that we're doing together is free speech.
Yes. Quite a good first topic, I feel, because I know we disagree on it.
Well, it stands alone. You don't know what I'm about to say. Do you have a policy proposal that you would like to put forward?
Yes, I do. I have an opening statement for you. And honestly, I'm going to be surprised if yours isn't exactly the same as mine. So I am really looking forward to hearing where you're coming at from this. But basically, I don't believe you can make a solid argument about where speech suddenly flips from being acceptable to unacceptable. So therefore, I am a free speech absolutist. I believe that if you're going to allow free speech, you have to allow any speech. But that being said, that does not excuse other crimes such as harassment or speech, which directly and clearly leads to violence. So that's the caveat. But in general, any speech is permitted.
Okay, well, I've got a little proposal here that reads: Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. That right shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I actually would.
Yeah, that's Article 10 of the ECHR.
Oh, that was smart. Oh,
Yeah.
well done. But remember last week? Remember last week in our pilot episode, I did say the issue was not what was written in the ECHR, it is the interpretation of what is written. I actually got in a big argument on TikTok in the comments section about illegal immigrants in the ECHR. So I done some research to check I was right. I'm definitely correct, but we'll set that to one side for
Okay, yeah,
this
that's a
week.
different issue. We must stay on topic. There is, however, a second part of that. That's sort of the first clause. It then says that
Oh, okay.
exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety. And I would agree with that,
Ah,
but I don't think it's entirely distinct from what you just said, which is that you can have freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is very important, but it must not stand in the way of other things, which are then crimes. And I guess the question then is what constitutes a crime? Because you said that
yes.
you can't possibly draw a line, but then you also insist that there must be a line drawn between what's criminal and what isn't.
Yes. So essentially, my position is for focusing on the way that UK law is currently operating. So you have laws against harassment, you have laws against violence. Like if you try to hire someone to murder someone, even though you don't actually kill someone, you're verbally instructing someone to murder someone. That's a crime outside of the laws which are being used to arrest people for hate crimes, which are essentially speech crimes.
Yeah, I think an important distinction in British law as it stands is that there is a distinction between speech in itself. I don't think holding an opinion is wrong in any situation that I've uncovered in the research that I did, but incitement to an action based on those opinions, so say racial hatred or terrorism, anything like that, is illegal, and there are lots of acts that make those things a crime. So it's where speech becomes an action that is the problem.
Yes, but a lot of times there's people who have been arrested in this country where they may have incited violence in a very loose sense of that word, but they were never actually going to conduct violence. Like, and that's where the interpretation of your principle falls down. And whenever I was reading about this, because I hear a lot of stuff on social media that I like read on X, you should see my X feed. It is fantastic,
I'm
okay?
sure it is.
But you never actually get behind the scenes and get into the detail. And what I found today was that a lot of this is actually coming from legislation in the UK from 2003, which is the term grossly offensive. So you can be put in prison for something that you say which is grossly offensive. That's been on the legislate book since 2003, but it's since 2019 the number of arrests made due to that piece of legislation has doubled. So therefore, the law hasn't changed, the interpretation has changed. And that for me is the big issue with where we are at in the UK at the minute, is that the law is so fuzzy, it's not very distinct, and that has led to an insane situation where in 2023 there was 120,000 crimes recorded for hate speech in the UK, almost 10 times more than the next closest country, which is Germany.
I think the problem is not necessarily the speech itself, though. It's the incitement is the crucial thing, and incite means to provoke or urge. So, take the
Okay,
example of Lucy Colony, for example. Very,
yes, that's what I
very
wanted to talk
prominent
about.
case.
Yes.
She herself didn't set fire to the migrant hotels as she insisted that
Yep.
people should do, but she was inciting other people to do it, and that crossed a line. And then she
She
pled guilty, crucially, to the charge, which was distributing material with the intention of stirring up racial hatred, which is illegal under the Public Order Act 1986. So it's not necessarily about the opinion. She's allowed to have the opinion and express the opinion. It's the actual incitement of action that there was a genuine threat of at the time, as we will all remember last summer, that crossed the line, which she then pled guilty to.
so
Crucially,
she did, but she says in interviews herself, now she's been released, that her lawyer advised her to plead guilty because he was telling her that she might not see her daughter for 10 years if she didn't. So the whole plead guilty thing, I think she was just in a position where she was taking legal advice from her attorney, and it was like choose the least worst option. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with a fairly senior police officer about this very case before she was released. And I was using the whole classic far right arguments of, well, look at this example. This Labour MP tried to convince that every single person protesting on the right should have their throat slit, but he was let off. So why is Lucy Connolly in jail? And he was selling the argument to me that the reason she was in jail was because the authorities and the police needed an example to calm the riots. They needed to make an example out of someone to try and prevent people from provoking more anger and outrage. And you absolutely have to set this in the context of what happened to cause these riots, which was that a man, an Islamist terrorist, went into a dance class and killed 3 children. And Lucy Connolly is a mother and put that tweet out clearly in an extremely distraught, angry state. Like, the point for me is I can imagine myself doing the same thing.
I'm not sure that's fair, because setting fire to hotels full of
But
refugees
she
is
didn't.
not.
If she'd set fire to the hotel, fine, okay,
Well, yeah, but she
that's
said set
fine.
fire to them
She
and
said
then doubled
she had a
down.
tiny following. She had a tiny following on social media. The post went viral, okay, because it turns out a lot of people agree with her sentiment. Ironically, I can imagine myself reposting it, right? And
Mm.
it was only up for 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours and she deleted it. And what happened? She was sentenced to 3 years in jail. A mother with a daughter was sentenced to 3 years in jail
Yeah,
for a
okay.
tweet that was up for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I think also it's important to distinguish the sort of gravity of punishment from whether or not we agree with the act
Fair.
itself, right? I
Yeah.
expected that we would fall into this hole, and I guess the whole two-tier policing thing can be a discussion for another day. But there is, I think, a sense that her punishment was disproportionate relative to people like Mike Amesbury, the Labour MP who punched a constituent and got essentially a 6-month suspended sentence, which meant that he didn't actually have to go to prison. And that doesn't seem fair, materially speaking, but I think that's more of an issue of how the justice system works rather than whether or not we agree with free speech on principle. I think besides the example of Lucy Connolly, a lot of the instances in which people get arrested for or sent down rather for free speech issues where they say such things, it's often there's often other stuff going on, and I maybe in the example of Lucy Colony, you have the sort of broader context where the government were trying to sort of just threaten everybody with going to prison essentially, and there was, I remember, a great drive to process the people they arrested as quickly as possible, in service of that effect. But there were other people. J.D. Vance mentions a guy who got sent to prison for praying near a abortion
Yep.
clinic. But what actually
Yep.
happened is that he breached the sort of safe zone around the abortion clinic to stop people getting harassed,
Oh,
for
I'm
which he
so
was
glad you
given a
mentioned that.
£100 fine. That was the
Yeah.
punishment, a £100 fine, which
Yeah.
he then didn't
But
pay, and then because of that, got a custodial sentence. So the fact that
yeah,
he
but like he was literally praying in silence. I get the whole you're not allowed into a zone area sort of thing, but like our former pastor of our church in Oma, he also in Northern Ireland was outside an abortion clinic, okay? Like trying to help the people who were going in and trying to educate them about his view on this and to pray for them. And he also was taken to court for it. That is mental.
oh, yeah, but
Like,
rules
I
are
know,
rules. And also, do you
yeah,
not
but the
think that
rules are
that's a form
wrong.
of harassment? Like, I mean, if
No,
you're a
because no, it's
secular,
not. It is not. It is not someone trying to shout at them and like I would disagree with that. Okay, I would disagree with sort of the American style where they're up in your face and they're just being horrible people. But the issue is that these tools the police have are being used against people who are not trying to cause harm. They are actually doing the opposite. There's another guy on TikTok and he stands in the middle of the street and he just preaches, okay? Preaches Christianity. And he is now not allowed into certain areas of the town centre. And he was arrested a few weeks ago because he was breaching that not allowed, even though he was causing no one any harm.
yeah,
Like,
but it
that
depends on
is a.
perspective, right? So you could argue that the pastor, in your case, has a right to freedom of speech and expression, but I think also a secular, young girl going to get an abortion is probably having a pretty rough day, and I think they have a freedom to their beliefs without being moralized at and being told that what they're doing is a sin. So you have to draw a line, and that line is the exclusion, the safety zone that's been drawn around these
Yeah,
practices.
but that's what
And
that's
the
what
fact
I
that a priest might cross it, I mean, would you feel the same way if it was an imam doing that?
yes, because it has to be all or nothing. Like if there was someone outside of our church, right, standing on the road saying that Christians are terrible people, okay, I wouldn't be happy about that. But that's allowed. That's okay. That's their right. And that I understand that reality that I can't just say one thing and then expect different standards from other people. And
Do
I
you
understand
do you
also that
believe in
some people don't
abortions?
see that.
Just out of interest.
No, no.
Okay,
Same,
so
same,
yeah, I
exact. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same point I made about the free speech absolutist thing. Okay, it makes zero sense to me that at say a random arbitrary date of I don't know 20 weeks, a bunch of cells suddenly becomes a human being. Like that is choosing an arbitrary date. You can't. That makes no logical
okay,
sense.
okay, okay. But the reason I ask that is because you're defending people who are intruding upon people who are trying to have abortions, but you don't agree with abortions. So you're sort of backing your own side in the culture war,
I
if you will. I think
like I
rather than
said,
making
give me an example of something I wouldn't agree with, and you will never find me saying they don't have the right to have that opinion. Like, that's
Yeah, but
why
there's a
I
difference between
totally
having the
understand.
opinion and acting, right? And writing on Twitter that you disagree with abortions is one thing, but actually going to an abortion clinic, with a religious disposition to preach or
But
otherwise to the
you
people
need to,
there
but again,
is a slightly
the
different thing.
context is everything here, okay? Because you put yourself in the position of someone who holds my beliefs, okay? So you genuinely believe that life begins at conception, then an abortion clinic is something which, what's happening there should deeply concern people. And I understand in the UK we don't have that concern. Everything just seems to have got used to it. Like 29 or maybe 40%. I can't remember the fact, but it's an insane percentage of pregnancies and abortion in the UK. I think it's 29%. Like, it's mental.
Well,
So
seems
if
high,
you have
but
that belief, if you have that belief, you can see the logic why that might be something you want to do. Does
yeah,
that
but
make
why? Yeah, but
sense?
the point I'm trying to make more immediately is that you can express that opinion. That's free speech. But the difference is when you're getting towards actually materially impacting somebody and causing them emotional distress, which is the line between free speech and a crime. And you admit that a crime is
Right.
bad. And if the
Practical
law
practical example.
establishes,
Practical example, right? Harassment would be if my former pastor was following someone around, showing up at their house at night, like trying to like throw letters through their doorbox all the time. Like, that is harassment. That's a crime. That's wrong. Being outside an abortion center when someone's walking past and maybe saying some words to them that aren't mean spirited, they're just expressing your beliefs, genuinely offering to help people, because Christianity is the religion of caring for others, love your neighbor like yourself. Like, I don't see that as a negative action. But yet, in this country, people have been arrested for that. And that's why people in America see that happening and they're like, what is going on in the UK? Because that's mental.
but as I said earlier, he was actually given a £100 fine, which is not quite the same as getting arrested for it.
That's
And then
still
he was
mental. Like,
arrested for not paying the fine, which is a slightly different thing. Um, I feel though that you're using this in service of a right wing culture war point, which is abortions, and I think actually the issues about free
choose a
speech
different
that you
topic.
touch on
I
coming
didn't
from
bring that
America. No,
up.
no, I'm going there. I'm going there. Um, Particularly from America, we have this great concern about free speech in Europe, which I think is not actually about free speech at all, but is rather about essentially cancel culture. It's about pulling the Overton window, what's acceptable to talk about, further to the right to legitimize what they believe. An example of that would be the Free Speech Union in this country, which, upon its conception, was said by its founder Toby Young as designed to counter cancel culture, which is not a legal thing; it's a cultural thing. It's a culture that they're attacking rather than any laws that we have in this country. And they do, I think, crucially have victories. They raised £25,000 for a train conductor who was sacked for a Facebook post saying, "I don't want to live in some sort of alcohol-free Muslim caliphate just to beat COVID-19." So they campaigned on that, on his freedom
He
to
was
say those
fired for
things.
that.
He was fired for that, but then crucially, he was given compensation by the train company that fired him. Right, so I don't agree at all with that. I lived through COVID-19. That is not, my recollection of that series of events. But he did have the freedom to say that, and it was defended. But it's crucially a cultural thing. But then you
But
have JD Vance. Obviously, I actually got the example of the chap getting fined for being within the safe zone around the abortion clinic from JD Vance. But JD Vance sort of also indulges in cancel culture. A lot of people will remember after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, he came out and said that if anybody was known to be celebrating the death, that their employers should be informed, which is perhaps not legal, but it's cultural. That is surely cancel culture. But then this is the same guy who's pointing at Britain and saying that our free speech laws are absolutely ridiculous. And we've seen just today, on the day of recording, that the US is looking at forcing tourists to hand over 5 years of their social media history in order to be allowed into the country. So I think it's really, really strange that the American line that you referenced to, we were looking at us around our abortion clinics, thinking, what the hell's going on? They're, in my view, much less liberal on free speech than we are.
I totally agree with being appalled by some people on the right now trying to cancel people on the left, almost like a revenge attack for the people on the left demanding that the people on the right were cancelled. Like, that is absolutely hypocrisy. Around the whole Charlie Kirk thing, it really, really bothered me how many people suddenly were like going out of their way to share things that people have posted, ruining their lives for a post on social media, which they never actually genuinely meant. Okay. So, absolutely 100% agree with you on that point. You have to take a position and it has to apply to everyone. So, that is my position, but I have been very disappointed with some people in their lack of ability to understand that it has to apply both ways.
Don't you
And
think
the
that this
whole,
is more telling though? Because the free speech thing, in my perception, is essentially a culture war point, and the right wing of the culture war. I disagree with the entire premise of the culture war, to be clear, but as it's perceived, it's a right wing talking point that has been really, really aggressively pushed by the right wing in America, but then they don't actually mean it. It's not
yeah,
actually in
so
service of free speech.
no, I agree with you on the hypocrisy point, right? That's been disappointing. But the right were absolutely censored. And a lot of people were absolutely censored. And it was censorship by the left wing. Okay. And I can back that up by saying that it was the social media companies who were the backbone of the censorship. Look at COVID-19.
What, all the
If
social
you
media
said,
companies that were at Trump's inauguration?
yes, but they've changed. Social media has
Have they?
changed,
Yeah,
totally changed,
Mark
100%.
Zuckerberg famously stepped down, didn't he? And Elon Musk took over
Mark,
X and
Mark
all this.
Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg put out a video like a year and a half ago to say that Facebook will no longer censor free speech. He literally has a video online of Mark Zuckerberg saying that. I'll give you a practical, real world example of me. On TikTok, the only video I've ever got banned was entirely factual. It was 2.5 years ago, and it was about climate change. And it was banned after getting 500,000 views for misinformation. I have made the same video countless times over, never had an issue. I have talked about way more controversial things recently on TikTok, never had an issue. It used to be if you mentioned the word climate change, your video would never have got views. Doesn't happen anymore. The censorship that used to be in place, that I know existed, has gone from social media. And I think all of us need to thank Elon Musk for that, because he was the one that liberated the bird. You bought X, and that has made
No,
all the difference.
I don't.
It has
But
made all the
in my
difference.
perception, though, I think this ties back to the fact that it's a right wing talking point, which is that the
But it's
Trump
not
camp
based on
made a,
nonsense. It's not,
no,
no, but
I
it's
think it is
not
based on
based on
nonsense because
nonsense.
the
No,
Trump
it's
camp
not.
made a massive deal of it, and it was only when they got in that
It
people like
is a massive
Zuckerberg
deal.
came out and said, "Actually, we support this as well." And then they went to his inauguration.
But
But that doesn't
have you
actually
never
mean they support free speech. I mean, X, I unfortunately have had to become familiar with it, and it's a very right wing platform. If you look at the stuff that becomes trending, which is obviously done through
but
an
no one is
algorithm, it's not
censored.
just an
No
open
one
marketplace.
no one
It's not, yeah,
is
but the
censored.
algorithm is a slightly different thing, right? It's not censorship can just be designing a system in such a way that certain voices don't get heard.
You are confusing the will of the people in picking up on what they want to hear with an algorithm, right? No one wants to hear left-wing talking points anymore. Everyone has moved to the right. And that is going to be
I
very
don't think that's
evident in the
true.
elections across Europe. It's going to be pretty obvious in the elections across Europe over the next couple of years. And like COVID-19 is another great example of what it used to be like. So it's not just a right wing talking point. This stuff actually happened. If you used to say that COVID-19 came from a lab, you were a conspiracy theorist, you were deplatformed. Guess what? It came from a lab. If you used to say that the
I don't know. I
vaccine,
haven't heard
it
that.
did come from a lab, it did come from a lab,
Okay.
I promise you. There's a CIA report that says it came from the lab. It never came from
Don't
bats
they
in a
not
wet
basically
market.
not know? Is my understanding of it.
No, they know. There was the Wuhan lab of coronaviruses. Like what? What do you mean it didn't
Beyond my
come from
pay
that
grade, so
lab?
I
Another
cannot
great example is the
comment on that.
vaccines, right? The vaccines, if you mentioned the vaccines, if you were against the vaccines, you were a conspiracy theorist and deplatformed. Guess what? The vaccines didn't work and they've probably killed more people than they've saved.
I don't
And
think
that's a
that's true.
fact.
No,
It
it's
is. Look at
not.
the excess deaths. Look at the excess death statistics in the UK and compare them to a country which didn't push the vaccine like Sweden. It's
Yeah,
horrendous.
but there's other
It's mental.
factors. That's correlation is not causation if that correlation
Like
even exists.
I got one vaccine, right? Biggest regret of my life because my mother booked it for me and she told me I have to go to it. And I now tell people that I identify as an unvaccinated person, but I did get one. So it's a miracle I'm still here, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, you could have
But
died.
the censorship was real, and the censorship has gone. That's a fact.
Well, okay, but this again, that's cultural. That isn't a legal thing. That's a cultural thing, and we're trying to construct a manifesto, which means we need to draw a line more concretely about where the law stands, which is
So
about defining
I
what a
will,
crime is.
I right culturally and on social media, the burden of censorship has been lifted largely because of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Okay,
I don't agree. I think
pretty
what's
right
happened
wing
is
of
that the
me.
Overton window has shifted right, which it
Well,
has
that's
happened.
okay. That could be why it's been
Yeah, well, I
successful
think
and
that
why they've
half
been
of
able to
your
do it.
beliefs formerly were outside of the Overton window, so you felt they were being censored, and now they're within the Overton window, and you're very happy about it. That's what I think has happened.
But I've been on social media. Like I'm the one making these videos. I got my biggest, most popular video banned for misinformation, and I've said the same things countless times. I never had an issue. I used to make videos and used to not be able to mention the word climate change because it would be like basically get zero views. So I've experienced this personally. But then there's a counter. There's a different slice of this, which is that the regulation and the forcing down of free speech on social media has been lifted, but
Yeah,
within
but
our own country, it's happened. It's went the opposite way. They're
yeah,
arresting unbelievable numbers of people for speech crimes,
you
which is
said a
why
minute
people are
ago
so
that I was
outraged.
confusing the algorithm for the will of the people in choosing what they want to watch, which I think could potentially apply to your videos about climate change. I don't know, of course.
But there was one
Um,
banned.
well, occasionally the YouTube auto mod messes up, doesn't it? Famously. Having looked at some people who got arrested, yeah, Joey Barton is another prominent recent
Yes.
example. Like it got in the headlines, but essentially what he got arrested for was harassment. And he got a suspended sentence, which
Wait,
just
wait,
means that
wait,
if
wait,
he,
wait, 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 wait. How what he got arrested for is mental. I couldn't believe it when I read it. Have you read what he actually said?
I read the
Who's the
BBC
guy who?
article about it.
Who's the guy messaged him? Who's the guy messaged him? Who's the guy on TV that he
Jeremy
called a bike
Vine,
nonce? Jeremy Vine.
yeah,
Jeremy Vine messaged him, and then he replied to the message and called him a bike nonce. And he said something very, very funny after that about calling 999 if he was near school. I think that's hilarious. I have the fact he was arrested and taken to court for that blows my mind. Genuinely. That should be
yes,
like
but it was in contravention of the Communications Act, which bans malicious communication on social media. But crucially, right? So, and we can discuss whether or not we agree with that, which I guess is where this is going. But he got a suspended sentence, which means that he doesn't actually have to go to prison, provided he doesn't do it again within 6 months. So,
yeah,
so the
yes,
headline that
yes.
he got a prison sentence is slightly misleading.
Right, that's fine. But guess who also got exactly the same sentence? Hugh Edwards.
No, we've
And
already
what did
addressed this, which is that the sort of
No,
disparity in
but
punishment.
that shows,
I
but that
accept, but
shows you
is
in
not the same
law.
issue.
That shows you in law. Okay, in law, the two are considered equal. And it was you were using the whole idea that it was a suspended sentence to kind of take away from the fact that he got a conviction for this. But in law, the two got the same sentence.
I've already addressed this. I think there is a great disparity between people like Mike Amesbury punching a constituent and Lucy Connolly inciting, obviously just very stupidly, and well, I don't dispute that she's probably a very unpleasant person as well, but online, right, there is a disparity between those things. There is probably also a disparity between Joey Barton and Hugh Edwards, but that doesn't. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about whether or not we believe in free speech. So would you'd argue that malicious communication on social media, which is the thing that he did that was bad, it should be legalized because that's the law that he
It
broke.
no other country in the world would he have been arrested and charged for that.
Well, you don't know
That
that.
is just well. There's 140. I think it's 140, maybe 120,000 people in 2023 who had a crime around hate speech. The next closest country, which I only found out today, and this blew my mind, was Germany with like 17,000. Like, we are the police state capital of the world for trying to arrest people for speech crimes. And it's not, I thought, before this podcast, I thought it was just all about the piece of legislation that came in 2023, the Online Communications Act. But a lot of this stuff is happening under legislation from 2003. So stuff that was 20 years earlier because it's grossly offensive. Like the Father Ted guy, right? It's such a good example. The Father Ted creator getting arrested at Heathrow Airport for comments he made when he was in America. And then he was obviously never charged because there was no crime. But they're still arresting
then
people.
what's the problem then?
Because they're arresting people. There was like 4 armed police showed up at the plane to arrest him for something he'd said in America. And what he'd said was that if you walk into a bathroom, if a woman walks into a bathroom and there's a transgender man there, kick him in the balls. Like, that's funny. How
Well,
is
it's
that
not.
a
Yeah, but no, I don't
crime?
agree. I think that probably falls into a similar category as to what Lucy Connolly said, which is that it's inciting a violent action.
No.
But
Yes,
it
but
is
it's
doing
not
that.
serious. It's not
No,
serious.
no, no.
It is
You
not.
don't
It's a
get to use that
joke.
as a defense. You can't do that, right?
Absolutely.
Stuart Lee's whole
Absolutely.
skit, right? It's a
There
joke
is
like on
stuff.
Top Gear.
There is
It
stuff I
allows
have
you to
said.
make statements that are intellectually indefensible, and then just say, "Oh, it was a joke. You can't come at me for that."
I
Like,
have
you
said.
can't
I have
debate that.
said. I have said way worse. Way worse. Okay. So if that ever gets out into public, am I going to be arrested by 4 armed police? Like, it's insane. It is holding everyone to an impossible standard. Every single
Is
builder in the
it?
country, if their WhatsApp group was hacked, every one of them would be in jail tomorrow. Like, you have to live in reality. The law in this country around free speech is totally broken. Totally broken.
I don't agree. I don't agree at all. There's no general right to free speech in this country
The police themselves, right?
other than what's in the ECHR. But the things that are explicitly illegal are the things like harassment, libel law. I mean, so some examples I'll fire at you. You have the Indecent Display Act in nine. Oh, I was going to say that again. I'm going to fire some examples at you. We have the Indecent Display Act of 1981, which forbids adult stores from having their goods on open display in their windows. So that's prohibiting their expression. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that's a good law because children can walk past. So obviously that's sensible.
Okay, so we agree with that one. What about the internments that happened in the Second World War? And you have, of course, the Official Secrets Act, 1989, which removed the public interest defence of leaking things. So you're not allowed to leak state secrets.
Yep, again, perfectly sensible.
Okay, so again, but this is already watering down your absolutist position because you're putting caveats in it. And a state secret is just
No, but
speech.
no,
You're
no,
just not incitement.
no, free speech can sit over here. That's an absolute right, okay? But things like state secrets and harassment laws, okay, or indecency laws, they are sitting over here in a separate basket. My problem is with the laws which directly attack free speech. Okay? So
Okay, no,
if
okay. Well,
you have
from that,
yep.
what about the internments in the Second World War? So, Jorian Jenks, who was a founding member of the Soil Association, was briefly interned because he was deemed to be a threat to the public because of his beliefs.
In principle, I don't agree with that, but you're looking back at history during World War II, there was like genuine Nazi sympathizers in this country. I'm not saying he was, I'm just saying there
Right,
genuinely
he
was.
was. You can say that.
Was he? Was he actually?
Yeah, oh, that's the whole thing. Yeah, the Soil Association is a
Oh,
fascist
well
political movement.
then, like that, but that then makes total logical sense. Then, if you're at war, you don't want people running around who are supporting your enemy. That's nothing to do with free speech. That's just called having a brain cell. Lock
Yeah,
them
but that's
all up.
belief. There's no. I don't know enough about him to say that he was or wasn't going to actually materially do anything to affect the
Yeah, but
British
you can't.
war effort.
You
But
can't.
the
You
concern
if
was that he believed the wrong things, so he was put in internment.
like, but that's logical in a war scenario. Like, I have no issue with that. No one like it's no one is going to have an issue with that. Like, if you have Nazi sympathizers running around the UK during World War II, guess what? Probably should lock them up somewhere because that's not something you want running around your country. The
Okay, but
consequences of ignoring that,
that's because those people are a threat to national security, which is
yes,
something that also applies in peacetime. So you have the Terrorism Act 2000, which makes it illegal to collect, possess, or access information likely to be of use to a terrorist.
yep, that again makes sense.
Yeah, but then see
If you
quickly
have a
you could just go a step further and say that you could outlaw far right parties, which I think does happen actually, doesn't it? We periodically
But wait,
prescribe
wait, wait.
far right movements.
What far right party? First of all, exists, and second of all, have ever resorted to violence? Like
Well, I
the
mean,
people
Mosley had
who are
his
being
black
arrested.
shirts.
I don't even know who that is. But the people who are being
You
arrested
don't
are
know who
not
Oswald
actually
Mosley
people.
is?
Lucy Connolly was never going to actually commit any acts of violence. Like, that is just factually, she was never going to go and burn down a hotel. Like, that is
No,
just a fact.
I'm
And
not
the
suggesting that Lucy
thousands
Colony
and
is.
tens of thousands of people who liked the post and who agreed with her sentiment, not a single one of them was going to go burn down a hotel.
There were riots. I'm not sure.
There were riots. Yeah, I'm gutted I missed out, to be honest,
Right?
because people were really fed up and angry.
Would
But
you burn down a
there was
migrant
people at the
hotel?
riots, and this is not no, I wouldn't. But there is people who were arrested at those riots, okay, for just being there. Okay? They done nothing. They didn't commit a crime, but they were just there. That is a huge overreach of the state. And the reason they were arrested, the reason Lucy Conley was sent to prison, okay, is not because of what they actually done. It was to send a message to the people of this country that you better behave yourselves or you'll all end up in jail. It is a huge overreach of power. And how is it happening? What's facilitating it is a very vague set of laws around free speech, which the judges can interpret in whatever way they deem fit. That is a huge, huge
Yeah,
issue.
okay, but then this is returning again to this idea that we have to define what is and isn't acceptable, perhaps more precisely than it's done in the current legislation. But I would say
Okay,
that
let's try
there's
that.
obviously a lot of legislation, but we just listed a few different things that I think do fairly explicitly prohibit different stuff. The Joey Barton example, malicious communication on social media. I mean that is something arguably that happens all the time. We have all received that from people we've
So
annoyed
then, Joey
locally and
Barton,
such.
let's go through these. Let's go through these. What can we get an agreement on around Joey Barton? Do you think he should have been taken to court for what I find funny? You might not find it funny,
Yeah,
but do
I
you think
don't
he should have
think.
went
Yeah,
to
but
court?
this is again similar to your line on the abortion thing, which is that you agree with the Christians that are in contravention of the law. So you're sort of like, well, it's fine because I agree with them. But I don't agree with those people, and I don't think that it's fine that they do that. And similarly, just because something's, I mean, bullying on a really basic, playground level is funny to some people, right? Or it's a power trip. They like it. That's why they do it. But it doesn't mean it's funny to the people getting bullied, which I think is essentially the Joey Barton thing. Um, I guess it sort of ties into the libel laws as well. I mean, you can use free speech and about somebody in such a way that defames them, and then they can sue you for it.
Yeah,
Is
but
that wrong?
libel is about, but libel, no, it's not wrong because libel is about the damage you cause. So if I said like something factually false and it damaged like your business or it damaged your reputation, it makes sense to me that you should be accountable for that damage. Okay? That's logical. Okay? If there is a single individual that you have caused financial damage to because of something you've done that is proven in a court of law to be incorrect, then that makes sense. You should be compensated. It's not about having a free for all. But at the same time, hopefully you have to admit that the level of police and government involvement in what is said in this country is far too much. And it is individuals who are being picked out whenever they're like one in a million. Like there's literally a million other posts on social media that say exactly the same thing as some individual who gets taken to court for it. Like the Joey Barton thing. How many people have said stuff like that online? It's just picking individuals. Like you have to have a position where it's sensible, and it's not sensible. The sensible position is everyone, and that includes people I don't agree with and people I agree with. The hypocrisy piece, 100% agree with you. It cannot be a different rule for different people. Okay, but everyone should have the right to have an opinion and to say their opinion, but that does not interfere with existing laws. I'll give you a
Yeah,
real
but that
practical
is how.
example.
Yeah, I
I'll
agree
give you a
with
practical
that, but
example.
that is how
Practical
it
example,
works in this country at the
right?
minute.
Practical example. If I say something which I find funny about someone, put a post up online, just like the Joey Barton thing, okay? And it's a one off, maybe 2 or 3 times. I'm not showing up to their house. They can block me if they don't want to see it. I haven't caused any financial damage to them. People can see it's a joke. No harm done. I might not be a nice person, but I haven't done anything illegal. But if I show up to someone's house repeatedly and start shouting through their windows and won't leave them alone, that veers then into harassment. That's a crime. Everyone will agree with a punishment for that crime. Does that not fair?
Yeah, well, I think you're completely neglecting the emotional toll that
That
directed
should not be
opinions
highly
can have.
valued. That should not be highly valued,
Well,
especially
no,
not if
I
it's
completely
online.
disagree. I mean, to take the
If
abortion
you don't
case,
if you
I
don't
mean, that
like
is
it,
essentially the problem, which is that it could be really upsetting for somebody who's having a crap day anyway to be moralized at by a member of a religion that they don't believe
yeah,
in.
but or
And that is,
or they
it's about keeping the peace and about social unity more broadly within the body politic. And I think that that is actually a very important thing that should be protected.
or they could wear headphones. Like it's the same with online. If you don't like what someone's saying about you, block them. Like there's easy outs so that you don't have to see the information and it doesn't
Yeah, but
affect you.
it's no. There is an easy out normally, perhaps. I'll give you that, but there's not an easy out if you're having to go physically to an abortion clinic, which is the reason that they have the safe zones around them. You
Yeah,
can't
but like
easily remove yourself from that situation if that's where you have to go, which is why there are restrictions on the freedom of speech within those very specific
but
areas. You
again,
can go and stand somewhere
it
else and
comes
have your
down
opinion.
to the proportional response thing. So like if there was someone was following someone home or was like showing up at their house because they'd had an abortion, that's harassment, that's wrong, that's illegal. But if someone's just standing on the pavement outside of an abortion center and you walk past them and it's a 10-second interaction, like yeah, you might get upset about it, but it's their right to have an opinion. And it's
Yeah,
not
but
like
the
it's
gravity of the
proportionality.
thing doesn't have any weight on whether or not it's right. I mean, that someone should get arrested for following somebody home doesn't really have any bearing at all on whether or not people should be able to pontificate outside abortion clinics. They're just two completely distinct issues. And I think, I mean, crucially, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's about empathy for the people that might be negatively affected, right? And yes, it's emotional. Yes, you probably don't agree with those people, but just for the
But do
sake
you not
of
think? But do you not think the people showing up there, like the person praying that didn't pay their fine, do you really not think they have empathy?
do you not
Like they
think that a
genuine,
right?
they
Let's take
genuinely
no.
care.
Do you not think
They
that
genuinely care for the
an
people.
Islamist terrorist is not fighting for a better world, or
Yeah,
that
but he doesn't
Lenin or Hitler
care.
or
He
any of
doesn't
these
care.
people were
But
not fighting for
there's
a
a
better
massive
world?
difference, right? There's a massive difference. So if a pastor is showing up to an abortion clinic, it is because he genuinely cares for the individual. You might not agree with his beliefs, but he is not a nasty, horrible person. And if he is, that's a very different thing. And I don't even know why that would exist. Okay, but if you're a terrorist, if you're a terrorist, you're going out of your way to kill people. You don't care about them.
No, no,
You
right.
don't
Okay, I'm gonna.
understand the
It was probably a
comparison.
bit insensitive to use the example of an Islamist terrorist. I just thought it might resonate with you. But you can take a Christian, well, not
Yeah.
terrorist as such, but the Crusades say.
Yeah,
So the
Christian
concern
terrorists
with,
don't exist. That's
well,
pretty
no, no,
interesting,
no,
isn't
it's
it?
no, no. I use this example because I think it's morally equivalent.
Okay.
But in the Middle Ages, the concern was that Christendom, i.e., Europe surrounding Rome, was shrinking, and we had the Moors in Spain, and we had, obviously Asia to the east of us, and we were being crushed slowly by these slightly more advanced civilizations. And because of that, we were panicking because only Christians got to go to heaven. So we went and invaded the Middle East and did lots of stuff there that was not great, really. But that was because those people needed saving. So it was done out of a belief that we would be fighting for their best interests, which I think also applies to lots of other crap things that have happened in history. I mean, Lenin is quite a good example of this. You can cause lots and lots of suffering because the suffering will create an everlasting utopia, and then that will outweigh any of the suffering, and you can really just do whatever you want, right? That's a belief, and he has that
Yeah.
belief, and he might act upon that belief as the Christian pastor who goes to an abortion clinic does, but that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean that the law shouldn't prescribe against it.
Yeah, but I would be careful about taking people who use religion as an excuse versus like actual Christianity. I think the two are very, very different.
Yes, but
So the
how can a law
Crusades,
distinguish you? You can have a law that says there is an exclusion zone around abortions unless you actually believe in
because
Christianity.
the law already exists around harassment. The law already exists around if you ran up to someone and you pushed them over.
Okay,
Like
okay. So,
it's
so
about
you have your exclusion zone, or rather, you don't have your exclusion zone. So there's no exclusion
yep.
zone. But if you harass people going to an abortion clinic, you get arrested. But if you are a true believer, that's not harassment because you're a Christian. Is that the line?
Yes, essentially it is.
Yeah, but
If you're not out
cannot
to harm
possibly legislate
someone,
that.
but you definitely shouldn't have a law which is arresting people because and taking them to court because they're silently praying. Someone was arrested for
Well, you just
silently
no, no, no,
praying.
no,
Have
no.
you
Go
heard the
back to where you
recording?
said
Did
that
you hear the
Christians should be immune
recording?
from harassment, right? You're suggesting that Christians should be above the law.
Not at all. Not at all. If someone wants, if an imam wants to come and stand outside our church, more power to him, right? There was genuinely there's a police recording, okay, of someone being questioned, a woman being questioned and arrested for silently praying. That is insane. I get it. She broke the exclusion zone, right? I understand that. But that's just proof that the law is bad. You should not be arrested for silently praying in a Christian country. That is
Yes, right.
mental.
But why was she praying there? She was praying there specifically because she
Because
knew
she
that it was
believes
against the rules.
because in her what she believes, like genuinely believes, okay, is that these people are making a terrible mistake. Okay? So it is not done out of a horrible mean spirit. It is done from a place of compassion and caring.
Yes, but again,
That really
that's
matters.
what the people who did the Crusades believed. So they went and killed loads of people in the Middle East. It doesn't make it
I
okay
don't think
believing that something
I
is
don't know
right.
enough about it. I don't know enough about it, and I highly doubt that was actually the motivation. I have a suspicion it was about trying to steal some gold and get it back to the the headquarters in London.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could make that argument about a lot of things, but it's surely similar for
Right.
terrorists
So
today. I mean, you could
what do
use a
we
less religious one. You could have the Unabomber, right? What he did was
yeah.
wrong, but he did it because he believed something, right? And I think we
But he
probably
killed
both agree.
people. What
Yeah, no, no,
what
yeah,
but he killed people.
he's allowed the belief, right? Shouldn't have done the action, but he did the action because he believed that it was in service of his ideology in a better world, right?
Yeah, but if he
That's
hadn't
not
done
okay.
anything wrong, if he hadn't actually acted in America, he wouldn't have been put in jail. He would have
Yes,
no
yeah, but
issues.
I'm using an exaggerated example of a similar thing where a priest might have a belief about abortion, but the action in which he goes and causes distress to people is where it
But it's
becomes
not done.
problematic.
It's not done maliciously. It's not done
Yes,
maliciously.
but
And like
I don't think the
Lucy Conley was
Unabombers'
never gonna.
intentions were
Lucy
malicious to
Conley.
sort of humanity as a whole. They were malicious to the forces that
But
he
he
believed were
blew people
destroying
up. What do
humanity.
you mean it? What do you mean it wasn't malicious? If there's a pastor
Blew
blowing
to
up abortion
humanity.
clinics, he should be in jail. Okay, it's not. That's not a complicated argument. Like fundamentally, the free speech laws in this country are being used in the most excessive way imaginable. The example and evidence I will give you is that there is almost 10 times more arrests in the UK in 2023 for speech related crimes than the next closest country, which is Germany, which has some really, really strict free speech laws around anti Semitism and the whole Nazi thing. Okay. Like in America, it was a fraction of that. And another really interesting statistic, I can't remember the numbers, but the percentage of people convicted out of the 130 odd thousand that were arrested is tiny in the UK. Whereas in Spain, for example, there's a way higher percentage actually convicted to the amount arrested. So what's happening here is that people are being arrested, people are being intimidated, and then not actually charged. There's actually like a word for it. It's like a non-crime hate speech or something. And there's a police officer came out a few weeks ago to say that in Surrey or something, they're no longer going to arrest people for non-crimes, which is what was happening, because it's taken up so much police time. So, like, even if you think that free speech, the laws are actually maybe useful sometimes, the amount of police time taken up with this nonsense whenever they should actually be dealing with serious issues like trying to track down a few more BBC presenters who are doing what they like to do. Like, that's where the focus should be. It's out of control. So the question, does the UK have free speech? No. JD Vance is right. We really, really don't.
Yeah, but Jay-Z Vance doesn't care about that.
He does. JD Vance is
No,
great.
he doesn't. He doesn't. We've already discussed that. But they're gonna make people
Do
surrender
you
their
see my
online
do you see
data.
my do you see my logic, right? And feel free to say no. I imagine you will, right? But do you see my logic that you have to take a position of absolutism and it has to apply to everyone equally,
You haven't
or
done
else
that
you're
though.
just well, I believe I have.
No, you haven't, because you said you believe in absolute free speech and then carved loads of massive caveats in it, like, indecent display, libel, internment, the Official Secrets
But
Act, the
they're not
Terrorism
but
Act.
they're not related. They're not related to free speech. They're
What
different.
are they related to then? Actions.
Actions.
Yeah, well, the
Yes.
other thing that's related
Harassment
to
is an
actions is,
action.
again, the safe zone around an abortion clinic. That's not really about speech at all. It's about being in a place.
Yeah, but it's about an action which is not malicious. Like that's the point I was trying to
That's
make. It's
arbitrary
people
and
who,
certainly not always
but
true.
that's a matter of opinion. Then you're down the whole opinion route again. Of well, I think that's a bad action. Like it needs to be some agreement around what's a bad action. Blowing someone up, bad action. Praying silently. I think most people in this country would say that's not a bad action. But
I'm not sure they was.
do you see my position where it has to be one or the other? And I agree with you about the hypocrisy on the right in America.
Yeah, but I think you're also being hypocritical because you're saying that actions that are bad should be prescribed.
Actions,
Prescribed and made.
actions,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. But then you're
Words are
defending
not a
actions
crime.
by Christians because you're like, oh well, I agree with them, which I guess it is a policy
Action,
position that you could take, but
but
it's not really a defensible one
the
because it
action
shows
you're
that
talking
everything you
about,
believe is just in service of a
but
sort
the
of
action,
right wing
no, but
Christian nationalist perspective.
the action you're talking about is showing up to a street and standing outside a building and praying for people. So yes, it is an action, right? But it's not the same action as harassing someone. So I get your
It's.
example.
I
Your
would
example
say
is a
that at least
smart. It's a smart
colloquially,
example.
I would say that at least colloquially, it is very similar to harassment because that's the intent. I mean, why was that woman praying there? Because she knew that there was an abortion clinic
I can
nearby.
see.
Clearly,
Yeah, I can see. I can see your point of view on that because it is stepping outside of just saying something and it is taking an actual action. I can understand that. I get your point of view. Hopefully, you can understand my point of view, where it is not a malicious action, it is an action out of empathy. Now, would I personally ever do that? No, because again, it's just, I understand why you, for example, find that problematic, but I fundamentally don't think people should be arrested for it. I think it's a massive overstep of the
Well, they
state.
were fined for it though. They weren't
But they were
arrested.
also
They were
arrested.
fined.
They weren't
I've had
arrested.
yeah, they were arrested because they didn't pay the fine, which is a different offence. I have received parking tickets that big for I would argue a much less meaty discretion, which is not obviously comparing
Someone
the
I
two
know
actions because that is a
personally,
fallacy. But
someone I knew as a child, so like someone like was taken to court for that exact thing. Like, so whenever you have someone who you've known personally for like a chunk of your life, it makes it more real that this is actually happening. Do you know what I mean?
what
And
done
like,
for
he's a lovely
standing
man
outside an abortion clinic?
standing outside abortion clinics preaching. Yes, that guy on TikTok who was preaching in the street. I wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't harassing people. It was a public space, but he was also got one of them court orders to say he had to stay out of this area. That is seriously infringing on people's rights. That would never happen in America. Like, we are
Yes,
going
but yeah,
down a
but in
slippery
America,
slope.
the government are suing television channels for saying stuff that they don't like, and they got the Jimmy Kimmel
But
show
that's
wasn't it taken off
libel.
the air?
Yeah, but that's because
Yeah,
they
but
lied.
it is
That's
the government
libel.
doing it, which shows that they do not believe in a free press as such.
But that's not free. That's not free speech. That's if you like the libel thing. I agree with you because it's causing damage to someone. You can't just lie and reach a massive audience. That's not the same as free speech because you're causing a damage to someone. Like, I get it. You're getting into murky waters with the whole libel thing, but in the most simple context, if I make up a lie that damages someone financially, they have the right to sue me in a civil court. I'm not going to go to jail for it, but if I owe them compensation for my actions, fair enough.
Okay, so
But if you're just
the impression I'm getting from this is essentially that you probably don't materially disagree that much with the way that the laws are set up. The ones I listed being a
yeah,
good case study, but there are certain ones that you think go too far. So these are like the Joey
it's not the
Barton one.
laws. It's not the laws because the law that is a lot of the blame for a lot of this was in 2003. It is the judges who are interpreting the law in a way it was never
Oh,
intended, which is how we get the
that's a
results
discussion
today.
for another episode, though, isn't it?
That's what I disagree with. It's the grossly offensive. Who is going to say what's grossly offensive? And that term grossly offensive has changed over time and is getting worse and worse.
Yeah, but then you need
Hence
to
why
amend
the
it
number
to
of
get
convictions have
to be
doubled.
more specific, which is the law
Correct.
point. But I mean, to say that you
That
agree
would
with the
be my
law
point.
means that you would agree that what Lucy Connolly was charged with, which is distributing material with intention of stirring up racial hatred, should be illegal. And you're now shaking your head.
No, that's the Online Safety Act 2023, which is a horrendous piece of legislation.
Okay,
So
so
that
you
law I
don't
vehemently
actually agree
disagree
with
with.
all of the law.
No, you're correct. I don't agree with that one
Yeah,
because it
okay. Well,
is such
so
a
the impression
catch-all.
I get is that you want to water down certain elements of it, but I also sense that those elements that you want to water down.
Go back to 2010. Go back to 2010. This was never an issue in 2010.
Was it not? I
No,
don't know.
no, it wasn't.
That's
The arrests
slightly
have
beyond my
skyrocketed.
memory.
The arrests have skyrocketed. Skyrocketed.
Yeah, okay. But as well as that, I do get the sense that the things you would like to water down are typically in service of what I would consider to be right wing talking points, like the Lucy Connolly
Applies
example,
to
or
everyone.
just
Applies to everyone. I have said that multiple times.
yeah. But
I understand there's other
it's the
people who
Overton
don't do
window
that.
thing, though, isn't it? Which is that it's sort of in service of one side of the political spectrum more than another.
Because the right are the ones who are being arrested and censored. Like the Labour MP who said that
No.
everyone should have their throat slit. He's fine. He's let off, no problem.
Yeah, but
Lucy
no. This
Conway.
is the thing. You see this in the farming process where they all go, 2-tier policing, yada yada. But they're
Yes,
wrong
that's a real
because you have
thing.
old people being arrested for holding up plaques that say, "I support Palestine action." They should be allowed to do that.
I agree. I don't understand the whole prescribed terrorist organization thing.
Yeah, okay, good.
I
So
don't.
we agree on that.
Yeah.
And I do agree that
Yep.
if things must extend one way, they must extend the other. However, you said that it is the right that's being oppressed. And I don't agree. I think you could argue both sides are, but I think certainly the left are as well, at least.
No, I think there is cases where you could make that point, but I am also making the point that until recently, including in America, the right and a right wing political opinion on certain issues was the opinion that was being suppressed. Now,
Yeah, but that's
the evidence
cultural
of
rather
that,
than legal,
Twitter
though.
files, that's cultural. Yeah, agreed. Okay. I agree with that. But we have now ended up in a position where the free speech has been liberated on social media and you could say what
Wow.
you want, but the laws in the UK still don't allow that. The laws in the UK are now catching people out because people are allowed to post whatever they want on social media, but the laws in the UK say, no, you're not. No, no, no. No, no, no. We're going to arrest you for that.
Yeah, but that's like
And
saying
that's,
that the EU, the UK's behind because they're not in
yes,
line with what Elon Musk thinks, which is
yes, terrible legislation. We are the
no.
worst in the
I
world.
don't think what Elon
We are the
Musk thinks
worst in the world.
is a reasonable position,
Elon Musk's position is exactly my position. Everyone has a right to an
that's
opinion.
a very
No
risky
one
thing
is
to
censored.
say.
I love Elon. He's my hero.
He's quite racist a lot of the time, though, isn't he?
He is not racist. Not
Oh
at
come on! I've been
all.
on his Twitter. It's unbelievable.
Never. No, no, no. He has an issue with illegal migration and he wants the white national identity to survive. He wants
Particularly in
Western
South Africa.
European.
You know, the whole white genocide thing? I don't know. I mean, you could argue
Yeah.
that's freedom of speech, but it's also just wrong.
I don't know. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. I know some South African farmers, so I'll ask them their opinion.
Oh,
But
well,
he's definitely not racist.
are they white?
They are, of course. But
Oh,
it's
God.
not racist. There's no way, no one in their right mind would actually believe Elon Musk is racist. Like that is a crazy thing to
Okay,
say.
so what's going to happen now is I will send in some tweets that we can just put over this bit and the viewer can read them
Okay,
as
good.
I say this sentence.
I agree with them all. I have not seen them, but I agree with them all.
I'll be amazed if
I
that
might be
stays in the edit.
arrested after this. Imagine if
Um,
I'm. Oh, I'll leave it in.
well,
I
actually,
will imagine if
I
I'm
think we
arrested.
should. That would be a good test, wouldn't it?
Yes, if I'm arrested. I'm worried now.
Jesus
So what do
Christ.
we agree on? Well, like I've actually agreed on a fair bit of what you've said. I think like
Well,
around the
actually,
harassment
I've sort of
laws.
convinced myself at the end, rather than you convincing me, that because of the whole prescribing Palestine action thing, I think there is actually a bit of an overreach in that quite clearly old people who are not terrorists keep getting arrested under terrorism legislation, which is why they do it. Obviously, they're making a point about the fact that they're obviously not terrorists. But that is ridiculous. Um, that said, I personally think that broadly speaking, the law is more or less sound. But a lot of it that I've referred to in here is pre 2010. So what you said about just going back to 2010, I could possibly agree with.
Yeah, so like sensible. Like if you're actually causing harm, okay, then fair enough. And here's a really good metric to judge it, right? If 90% of people agree that that person should have been arrested, right? And that there's no issues, it's almost like trial by jury, okay? And fair enough, the law's good. They should be punished for what they've done. But if you're in a situation where it becomes a culture war and 50% of people, like the Lucy Conley case, are adamant that this is the greatest injustice that's ever happened, and the other 50% of people in the country think that, of course, she should have went to jail, look what she said, then just like a jury trial, that's probably not a good position to convict someone, and it shouldn't be a crime. Like, that's a really good test because that's sort of putting democracy into what people's morals are and what they think is acceptable and not acceptable.
No, I don't agree to that because it's tethering what's
But
legal
50%
to
of the
the Overton window.
population, but 50% of the population are not going to agree with someone harassing someone.
No,
They're
it's,
not
that's
going to
to me. To
agree.
me, that's too close to anarchy because it you can't rely on what everyone thinks to decide what's
So
legal.
instead, the position is radical left-wing judges at the behest of the government convicting someone for 3 years,
No,
a
you've just
mother with
that's
a daughter.
ridiculous. They're not radical left wing
That's
at
what
all.
happened. Yes,
No,
they are. Some of the judges are a huge
this
problem.
is
So the
also
Joey
just
Barton
not what we're
case.
talking about today. We're talking
No,
about freedom of speech laws, and you're
but
now
they are the
talking about
ones
the
who are
judges.
enacting. They are the ones who are enacting the interpretation of the freedom of speech
But
laws.
that's a
That's
different.
why
We're
it's
talking
changed.
about the right to freedom of speech, which is very different from the laws, right? And I could agree
Okay.
with just going back to 2010. I don't agree with tethering what's acceptable to the zeitgeist through some sort of jury system because I think statecraft has to be more concrete than that, and you could just pull
Okay.
the Overton window either left or right, and then everything just goes off the rails. It's not a good idea.
Happy to agree. Happy to agree to that. Happy that was a bad idea. All right. So our conclusion, right? Our conclusion is that the position of the UK in 2010 was a better state than we are currently in. And if you want to justify it to yourself, you can use the Palestine Action people, right? That's fine.
Well, I
That has to
don't. I
apply
just
equally to
actually no.
everyone.
I haven't read much on specific legislation passed immediately before or after 2010, and therefore I am slightly flying blind in agreeing to this. But I'm just saying that in case there is some egregious piece
No,
of legislation that
basically
was.
to summarize accurately for you, the 2003 stuff is basically grossly offensive, which is now being misused, never an issue before. And then the Online Safety Act is so far reaching, it's just a bad piece of legislation and should never have been put in place. And it was the Conservatives who done it, and they're a bunch of absolute morons.
Okay, well, in lieu of me actually having any idea what I'm talking about, we will settle for return to 2010. I think.
We can correct it in next week's episode
Yeah, I'm sure we
if you've
will.
changed your mind.
Politically hopeless, no map, no compass, but